Hi guys, this is Mary. I'm the teen librarian at the Scotlandville Branch Library, and this month we are going to be making stained glass candle holders. Now this isn't actual stained glass, but you can get a very similar stained glass effect with some glue and some tissue paper. Now as a heads up, supplies are very limited, so first come first serve. Now let's go ahead and take a look in our bags. In your bag, you will have a small mason jar like this one. You'll have a cup with some glue in it, and you will also have a paintbrush. Then you will get a small tea light candle. This is one of the battery powered ones. Then you'll also have some strips of tissue paper. I've got some Valentine's Day colors here, but you might get different colors in your bag. You'll also need some scissors from home, as well as some water. Okay, first off, you want to start by watering down your glue. You want to go by feel on this more so than measurement. I would recommend starting with about a teaspoon of water for the amount of glue that you have in the cup. And then stir it up really well. You want to make sure it's not super thick, but also not super watery. If it's still thick after about a teaspoon of water, start by adding just a few drops at a time until it's the right consistency for you. Okay, so next you're going to take your strips of tissue paper and you're going to start cutting them up. I'm going to cut mine up into squares, but you don't have to cut yours into squares if you don't want. If you have those little paper punchers that'll punch your paper into hearts or flowers or something like that, you can use those. Or you can use your scissors and just cut them into different shapes that way. But I'm cutting mine into squares because, if I'm honest, it's easier that way. You also don't have to use all the colors of tissue paper in your bag. As you can see, I'm going to be using all 4 colors of tissue paper, but you can use as many colors or as few colors as you want. So, if you watch as I'm kind of cutting all of the squares into roughly the same size. That was probably a mistake on my end. You might want to consider cutting your tissue paper into, varying sizes, some bigger, some smaller. It makes things a little bit easier when it comes to filling in certain gaps. So, you might want to cut them into different shapes if you want it to look a little bit fancier at the end. Okay, so once you've cut up all of your tissue paper, it's time to start applying it to the jar. First things first, you'll want to paint a thin layer of glue all around the sides of the jar. I don't put any on the lip of the jar or on the bottom of the jar because I don't cover those parts with tissue paper. But if you want to cover those parts with tissue paper, you're more than welcome to. A little tip that I've noticed while I was painting this jar is if you hold on to the lip of the jar and you turn the jar upside down while you're painting, it makes it a whole lot easier because you're not putting your fingers all over the parts of the jar that you just finished painting. So you'll want to try to be kind of quick about this. You don't need to be like, a speedster. You don't need to get it all done in like 30 seconds. You'll have some time before it dries, but the faster that you can get it done, the wetter the glue is, the easier it's going to be for the tissue paper to stick. Okay, now take a square of tissue paper, lay it down on top of the glue, and gently smooth it down. Once you've got it smoothed down, now it's stuck, add the next square of paper and just repeat. You can use your fingers to smooth it down, like I'm doing here, or if you're a little heavy with your hands, you can use the paintbrush instead. If you use the paintbrush, it's got that added bonus of putting down another little layer of glue to kind of seal those edges. It makes it a little bit more secure. And you're going to have to go over the whole thing with the glue anyway at the end. So if you're doing it a little bit along the way, it makes it a little bit easier. You won't have to do it all at once at the end. Whatever you prefer. One thing I will warn you about, be careful when smoothing down with your finger. You can tear it like I did right there. If you do tear it, it happens, it's fine. Just take a little bit of glue, dab it down, kind of seal that torn edge a little bit. it'll be fine. You know, this is art. Art isn't about perfection. Now, another little word of warning. Be careful when overlapping. You don't want to put too much overlap. You don't want to put like 4 sheets of paper right there on top of each other. The more you layer, the darker that section will be when you finally put the candle inside. And the point is to have as much of that light shining through as possible. So be very careful when you're overlapping. When you start putting your squares of tissue paper up at the top of the jar near the lip, you might notice there's a little bit of tissue paper sticking up on the top. If that's the case, just take the glue and kind of brush it down so it molds to the, top of the jar where it curves a little bit. It looks a little bit nicer. You don't have that ragged edge sticking up. It kind of sticks to the jar. It looks nicer. All right, so I'm getting pretty close to being done here. I've got some little narrow gaps left that I need to fill, and I cut my paper way too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these big squares into smaller strips so I can, fit them into those gaps. And now, as you can see, I've got this weird kind of L-shaped gap. So I'm going to have to fix that by cutting an L-shaped strip of paper and go ahead and put that into place. There we go. You might want to be careful if you're using your brush to lift up the pieces of tissue paper. You can do that, but it can be a little bit fiddly with those big, weirder shaped pieces if that's what you're doing. But, as I can see, we are just about done. Now, if you weren't using the paintbrush to smooth down your pieces, you will want to go ahead and go over everything with a layer of glue. I'm just kind of touching up everything right there. But, yeah, that's just about it. I'm going to move all of those tissue paper pieces out of the way. Now's the worst part. You've got to wait for it to dry. So, once it's dry, I will get back to you and I will show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, so after about 2 hours, we're done. With the candle inside, this is how it looks. It looks cool when the lights are on and when it's bright out, but it looks even cooler when it's dark, as you can see. Well, that's about it, so I hope you have fun if you try this, and I'll see you next time.